2, 1. How's it going, everybody? My name is Christopher. This is my dad, Leighton, and this is the Oosthuizen Show. And with Thanksgiving coming up in just a couple days, we're going to be doing a full Thanksgiving show talking about the foods that your dog can eat, the foods that your dog cannot eat for all of the counter surfers out there, and then also how to deal with your dog in an active and high energy environment like when family come over for Thanksgiving. So we're going to be tackling all of that in the show. Should be a really good, informative show, especially with the timing of the holidays around the corner and all the family members coming over. And before we get into that, a quick word from our sponsor.
So, of course, most of you guys know us. We're with Partners Dog Training School. That's what we do for a living. That's what pays for us, and that's what sponsors us and pays for all our activities. A lot of things happening. Partners, crazy weekend, very busy Thanksgiving weekend. I think we're either full or pretty close to full. Had a kind of a hectic week with all the rain, and we had to do some repairs to the property, but overall we got through it fine.
Yeah, and actually just before we get into the show here, we have a little bit of an update from a previous episode on where we talked about Belgian Malinois and we talked about working dogs, and as part of that episode we mentioned Conan, which was the Belgian Malinois that took down the ISIS leader. I don't know, what country were they in again?
They were in
Iran.
No, they're in Afghanistan, wasn't it?
Afghanistan. I'm not sure.
I can't believe
it's probably in the article here, but a quick word, I guess, from Trump. But we actually don't have audio, so are you going to be able to speak over it a little bit?
So what we're just kind of quickly sharing this here on my page and try and type at the same time while I'm thinking about Conan. I'm super impressed with this dog, Conan. All right, there we go. So basically, we're going to show you a little clip of Conan with President Trump and with Vice President Pence. And then we're going to talk a little bit about that. While it's rolling, I'll kind of chat about it. We don't have audio from the tape, but I want you especially to look at how well behaved this dog is. All right, so should be able to see him there. For those of you who don't know, that's obviously a Belgian Malinois. He is super well behaved. Look at him, and obviously Vice President Pence has a little bit of a connection with dogs. You can see when he touches the dog, he's actually cut. The dog is actually responsive towards that. But what was really cool about this is normally we don't advise having a high drive dog into a high stress environment. And I cannot imagine how stressed that environment was. There are probably hundreds and hundreds of TV crew and everything in front, and yet this dog was super well behaved. I don't know if that's the dog's handler. I doubt it personally. Probably more likely the guy on the right is a Secret Service guy.
Okay.
I don't think that's the handler of the dog. You can't see it here, but I watched that video a couple of times, and you can see the dog doesn't really interact very much with the Secret Service guy. He's more really focused on Pence than he is on anything else. But look how well behaved he is. He's calm. He's relaxed. A friend of mine actually said maybe he was drugged. No, I don't think he was drugged. It's just a well-trained dog, and that's of course what this is all about. That's what we talk about all the time. So here they've got this awesome military working dog that is patrol trained as well as explosive dog trained, so they're called dual trained dogs. And you can see he lifted his paw up there a second ago, kind of wanted a little more attention, but just loving it. And my Belgian Mal does the same thing. Another thing I wanted to mention is notice how far Melania is standing from the dog. So after this, they asked her, are you going to look at adopting a dog, a military working dog for your home? And she was like, nope. Good call. Definitely not the right dog to go into a home like that. And obviously we want to make sure that everybody knows that as well. Another cool thing about this dog is, see how his ears are nice and down and flat. He's relaxed. You can kind of see he nuzzles a little bit there, like he kind of pushes up. I'm not sure if we completely synced with our sound in the video here, but you can see he's constantly looking for attention. That's the kind of thing we want to see in any dog, especially in a working dog. It's a dog that really wants to connect with you. He wants that attention, willingness to please. He's kind of lifting his paws up saying, hey dude, come on, give me some more attention. I mean, this could not have been better scripted if I had tried. I mean, I don't think it's another dog, but it's almost as if they used a fake dog just to kind of show you the attention, but they wouldn't have done that.
Well, and that's really how those types of dogs should be. And we're actually going to talk about in this episode.
That place was in Syria, by the way.
Oh, it was in Syria.
Yeah,
okay.
I just remembered now.
Gotcha.
Syria.
No, that makes sense. And we're going to talk about in this episode on if you do have a working breed dog, they should be able to interact with the family and so forth, just like any other dog if they're trained for protection specifically. Maybe not some of the other working breeds like in law enforcement and so forth. But if you train your dog correctly in protection, they should be able to socialize and act in a high energy environment just as well as if there was a threat in the area. That's really the difference between the dogs that are bred and trained well and the dogs that aren't.
Yeah, and it's a complicated subject, and we've talked about it in the past. We're not going to get into that tonight in more detail, but it was just cool to show you that piece of video and to show you guys what we were talking about.
So today on the episode, like I said, we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving. Obviously, a big thing of Thanksgiving is obviously the food, and we want to make sure that we're setting your dog up for success, both from what foods they are allowed to eat. If you do want to give your dog some of the food, of course, sometimes we don't always recommend giving them human food, just because that can kind of set a bad precedent in terms of them starting to learn to beg. But if you are going to give them human food, or if you're having friends and family over and they start to slip them some food underneath the table, making sure that they're aware of what foods they can eat and what foods they definitely cannot eat, or else you're going to be taking a trip to the hospital, which obviously no one wants to do on a family holiday.
Yep. Before we get into foods, I want to mention something. So, you know, one of the dangers of having a discussion like this is that we tend to generalize, and generalize means we try and apply the same rule to every dog out there.
Right.
That's not obviously a good idea. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about training, or we talked about Conan a few minutes ago, or now we're talking about food. So there are dogs that can do certain things, like can eat certain foods and so on, especially dogs that have been brought up in a rural environment, dogs that are far less domesticated. I don't want to say wilder, but dogs that have, you know, if they've been
just
eating
like
roughage,
humans, like dogs have different allergies and so forth to food as well. Even.
Right.
So like,
and there's a strong belief that the more we domesticate our dogs, the less likely they are to be able to handle eating something. So you know, for example, when I was a kid, we used to give our dogs chocolate as kids, and obviously nowadays we're going to tell you don't give your dog chocolate. Well, none of my dogs had any negative effects from that. We used to freeze grapes and give that to the dogs, and now it's kind of discouraged. So there's lots of these little rules that have come in. As a kid growing up, my dogs used to get bones and so forth, which nowadays we frown upon. Sarah's little dog, we give that dog any kind of a bone, that dog's going to be throwing up that night, or having diarrhea the next day, or worse, that night while we're trying to sleep. And boy, there's nothing that wakes you up faster than hearing a dog starting to retch, or hearing a dog that is having diarrhea in your bedroom. I tell you something, there's no better. If we can only figure out a way, you should develop an app that replicates that sound of a dog having diarrhea in your room, because there's no better app to wake you up than that, trust me.
Yeah, that'll be a good alarm clock.
So just remember, these rules don't apply to everybody, and there are some exceptions, and obviously we just want to make sure all your dogs are safe.
Yeah, so the first thing, we're going to go down the list of foods that your dog should not eat, so we're going to cover those first. And the first thing is stuffing, and I want to read some of the notes here. So obviously Thanksgiving dressing, it's made of onions, scallions, or garlic, and these ingredients can be toxic to dogs and cats, by the way, for that matter, and can cause anemia, which is the destruction of red blood cells. So it is best to avoid feeding any amount of stuffing to your dogs, no matter how good it might taste for yourself. And then the next...
I don't like stuffing, so...
Yeah, I'm not a fan either, but I'm sure that is going to be just as much... terrible for a lot of people to hear as well, but definitely don't feed it to your dogs if you're going to eat it yourself. Another thing, ham and pork. Now this might be a little bit in large amounts, but ham and pork can cause pancreatitis, an upset stomach, vomiting, and diarrhea. It also is high in fat, which can lead to obesity in pets if they're eating large amounts. But even a small amount of ham can contribute to large amounts of calories or food in a dog or a small dog or cat's diet. So again, wanting to stick away from ham. Do you want to go over turkey bones? So
turkey bones are one of the bones like we talked about earlier on, and sometimes you'll find that depending on how the turkeys are raised, the bone is either really soft, like almost like a rubbery sponge type bone. See the same thing with chicken bones. These are things we don't want to give our dogs, because what happens, the dog, instead of crushing that and breaking it up into little pieces that they can ingest, they'll bite on the bone, and they'll try and swallow large chunks of it, and the last thing you need to do is
start to splinter.
Yeah, well, splintering, ironically, that would be a brittle bone, but again, same thing applies. You don't want them splintering too much, because then obviously that can cause injuries to their throats, tracheas, and to the internal organs, the intestines and so forth going down.
Mashed potatoes. So mashed potatoes have a lot of, mashed potatoes for us is really, really good. For dogs, not as much. Has a lot of obviously butter and milk, and can cause some diarrhea, especially if your dog is lactose intolerant, which I didn't even know that dogs could be lactose intolerant.
You know, again, it fits in that category of some dogs are and some dogs are not, you know, and there's a lot of debate in the world, and I'm not going to get myself into too much trouble here tonight, but one of the theories is that the food that we feed our dogs nowadays is not necessarily beneficial. Boy, that's a nice way of copying out of the answer. It's just junk. It's just not good food compared to what we used to do in the old days. If you're somebody who feeds your dog natural, or feeds the dog a heavy meat raw diet, I think raw diet's awesome, but it's a huge amount of work. We have a couple of friends that do that, and You know, I look at the trouble. I mean, there's one. I have one friend that spends
I think
2-3
we have a
hours on a
dog here
Saturday.
now that's got like 6 different things
Yeah.
in its meal.
Makes it a
We've
lot
gotta-
more difficult. So, but you know, you can do that. But a lot of people do believe that the food that we feed nowadays, just because of the way we feed, the kibble type food, that's led to all these allergies issues and things like that. Because to be honest, 15, 20 years ago, I didn't even know about half this stuff, you know, and even further back than that, we never even talked about it.
So another thing is foods with grapes. A lot of grapes are raisins. So grapes and raisins are very virulent and potentially deadly because they cause kidney failure. And so you want to make sure that any foods that are cooked with that, or maybe salads that have grapes or raisins in them, definitely wanting to keep
So no
those
more
away from
frozen
your dogs.
grapes as a treat, right?
Yeah, that's interesting because that's definitely a treat that a lot of people use. But again, it's probably large amount of like in large amounts basically, and so they then link that to dogs and so forth. So I'm sure that there's dogs out there that have eaten grapes and have been fine, obviously, because they use it sometimes as treats. Chocolate, obviously, chocolate is something that, while very sweet for us, can be toxic to dogs and cats, and especially darker chocolate. So I guess the more potent it is, you know, can be potentially an emergency if your dog starts to ingest it, especially large amounts of it.
Yeah, and stay away from my South African chocolate, okay? He's forever freaking digging into the chocolate that I import, which is my favorite chocolate. Him and my daughter, Alessandra's actually standing on the other side. She's hiding away from the camera right now. So Busy says, thumbs up if you think Christopher's RBF is the best. What's that?
RBF.
Brittany, you're going to have to specify what that means.
Oh, I know what it means. Resting bitch face.
Seriously?
Yeah.
I thought it was your hairstyle. I was going to say, you definitely have a better hairstyle than me. Anyway. All right, so let's talk about things that are actually safe for your dog, or things that you can do. So obviously, lean meat. Any kind of meats that dogs, you know, the filet steak, you know, steak, of course, being the primary thing. So, you know, while we're on that subject, we will often...
actually, real quick, before we get on to the things that are good with it, walnuts, pecans, pistachios, spices, all of those things, again, often mixed into meals, can still be potentially toxic and so forth for your dog, can cause, you know, abdominal, upset stomach, and intestinal damage and so forth, especially if they're rich in fat. So you definitely want to keep those away from your dogs.
All right, I want to talk about good stuff.
Now we can talk about good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure that everyone's, you know, staying safe out there.
So one of the things we always advise is that when you have treats that you give your dog, you have a low value, which is normally like just food or kibble or something like that, and a high value treat. So we've talked about hot dogs in the past, using cheese, using peanut butter. We have a trick. We'll take peanut butter, wipe it on our hands, and then wipe it onto something, and dog will address or focus or target onto that item. It's a really good way to target your dog, especially if you trade your dogs for trick training and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously lean meat, steak, anything like that, great high value treat, really works well with the dog. But make it work for it. You know, kind of like I was training a dog the other day to not take my fingers off, and I was keeping it closed up in my hand like that. And man, did that dog want that steak, you know, out of my hand. I was like, nope, you got to eat nicely. And then eventually the dog figured it out because it really wanted the treat.
Fresh fruits, so apples, oranges, bananas, watermelons. Watermelons are often used as treats, especially in the summertime. You can freeze them, and then that makes it even nicer for your dog and so forth. Yep. So definitely fresh fruits.
Make sure you remove the seeds first.
Yep, remove the stems and remove the seeds if they have any, because those can cause issues.
Right, vegetables. Dogs have, you know, we like carrots. We'll freeze carrots and give that to a dog. Keeps them occupied for a while. It's great for a dog with separation anxiety. Kind of give them something, makes them chew on it for a little while. It keeps them occupied. Cucumber slices, zucchini. I've never given a dog zucchini. So we did some research on this, and I didn't see the zucchini before. Plain baked potato, I guess. Also never done that. But any of those kind of raw foods and so on. The other day I went off to a resort where they were doing raw vegetables. It was really cool. They had all the vegetables laid out in their garden. You drive past, and I had a salad from the place, and it was absolutely awesome. And those vegetables were literally straight out of their garden. So anything like that would be great for your dog. And
then a really good thing both during Thanksgiving time as well as if you want to mix some of this into your dog's daily diet is cooked white rice or even some pasta, obviously without spices, without butter and milk and everything along those lines. But that can also help if your dog has stomach issues or has trouble eating in some cases. So that's another good alternative. And I was wondering if there was any places, I know like Starbucks does the puppuccinos, and I believe
Yep.
like Dutch Bros does something along similar. I was wondering if there's any places that do something around the holiday times, but I'm sure those same places do.
Yeah, they probably do. And by the way, if you live in Cave Creek
Dunkin'
or in
Donuts
the
has
Carefree area, Dutch Bros just opened today. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that.
Have you been there already?
I haven't, because it's such a I know it's going to be a disaster to go down there.
It's gonna be like 5 million cars
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, in turn, and like I think people were even complaining that just all of Cave Creek Road is now backed up because of it, which I'm not surprised with at all.
Great.
So,
Okay.
what happens if your dog does ingest the foods that you don't want them to ingest? So you want to make sure that you can have a veterinarian on call. Make sure that you're making those plans ahead of time, so that way you have a veterinarian that you know is open 24/7 if you do need to go down, and if there is an emergency. You know, the most important thing is to be able to have those plans in place so that you can take action if something were to happen. And then like bread
put them in
helps,
put
a
your
lot of
vet
water.
in your. I was actually just looking it up now.
Yeah,
we
your
have
favorites.
we have a couple of vets that we use, but I always tell people things you put in your phone and your favorites is your attorney, because you never know when you might need to call your attorney. I'm just seeing it now, Tim, for she's like in
Do you have his
capital
number
letters.
memorized?
I don't, but
No.
trust me, it's going to be the first call I call if I ever need to call him.
If you're in lockup, do they allow you to get your phone and like look up a number?
I'm not sure. That's why I'm going to call you first if I ever have to get arrested. But joking aside, though, make sure that you have those numbers in your favorites list, because that way you can get it real quick. If you do have an emergency, call the vet ahead of time. Make sure that you know who's open, who's not. Remember, over Thanksgiving, a lot of the hospitals are closed, so it's got to be an emergency hospital, 24-hour. We've got a couple of 24 hours. Scottsdale has one. Animal Health Services up in Carefree, and then
Pet
urgent care down on Cave Creek and the 101. We have all of those. We can contact them, reach out to them. We actually have one or two of their personal numbers as well, so we can get them to come in. We always have that. The more you prepare for those kind of things, the less likely you are to like be in a panic situation and not be able to remember stuff. It's really tough sometimes when you are in a panic to remember. So call ahead, make sure you let them know you're coming. Be prepared for something like that. The more prepared you are, the less likely you are to need it.
And is then like forced regurgitation? What about that?
Yeah, if you can get to the vet, do that. Making your dog throw up, there's different things you can use. I don't really want to get into that now because I'm hesitant. There are some things, if you want to look it up online, that can cause your dog to throw up, to regurgitate and bring out that thing. But there's pros and cons of some of those things too. So my suggestion is you let a vet deal with that. If you know what you're doing, then obviously you're not going to be asking me this question as to how you make that happen. I've done it a couple of times with dogs in my life. It's worked on both times, but I also had a dog that I saved by putting a drip on the dog, and then afterwards the client was upset with me because I stuck a drip in their dog. But the dog was dying, or not dying, I'm sorry, the dog had heat stroke, and we had to do that, and at the time I thought it was a good idea.
What about like bread? Does bread help, or is that really only like if they ingest like?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't give them anything at that stage unless you really know what you're doing, because there's lots of things that can go wrong. And when we do programs like this, I'm always nervous that somebody's going to say, oh, well, because Leighton or Christopher said, do this, let's try that. No, get them to a vet. Most times we're within 10, 12 minutes of a vet here, and there's not a lot you can do in that time that's better than getting the dog to the vet first. But the best thing you do is let the vet know you're coming, so they're prepared when you walk in, that when you arrive and you just go straight into the surgery room, and they can basically do what they need to do.
Symptoms, so like lethargia,
retching, trying to throw up, not being able to throw up, diarrhea. Anytime your dog looks unusual, doesn't mean to say if they don't feel well you got to rush off to the vet, but I'm talking about if you think that they've got something in them. I wouldn't waste time trying to figure out what they've ingested. I would basically get them in the car. You could let somebody at home figure out what they may have eaten or not, and you get to the vet in the meantime, and they can call you, etc. Remember, time is of the essence. Don't have an accident driving to the vet. That's ironically not something we should be kidding about. Quick story: when we were in search and rescue, when I was in search and rescue, our instructors always used to tell us, like, don't race to the station to launch or to go out. Take your time getting there, be safe, etc. And yet I still know of cases where people were just out of control getting there because they were in such a rush. So stay safe, be sensible, drive, safely. Don't injure somebody or kill yourself on the way to the vet.
And then the other thing I want to comment on real quick is when you do have friends and family over, obviously it's going to be a high energy environment. If you especially have a dog that maybe is nervous meeting new people or just anxious in general, or if you have a dog that just has a ton of energy and they get too excited meeting new people and can potentially, jump on them or knock them down or revert back on some poor behaviors, having your dog crated or off in a room separate when guests are first arriving is a really, really good way to break some of that initial tension. And then if you feel that your dog is able to handle those situations in a calm manner, bringing them out afterwards and introducing them gradually to the people around will really help make sure that you have success when making those introductions to your dog and your family and friends over the holidays. Because if you do it all at once too quick, either like I said, they could get too excited and do something inappropriate, or if they're anxious and so forth, then they could do something inappropriate in that case. And then always like watching your dog while there are things going around, especially if you have kids over, making sure that they're playing appropriately with the dog if they are going to be playing together. We've heard countless stories of a dog that's bitten a kid because the kid was being too rough with the dog while playing. So you want to make sure that that you're teaching them what is appropriate play and what is good in those situations.
And don't be shy to just leave them crated in the bedroom or something like that. Those couple of hours, those few hours. If you have a dog that stresses out easily, that's got some separation issues, that's got some reactivity issues, that's not the time to try and force that on your guests and so forth. It's kind of like politics, just kind of like put it to one side during Thanksgiving dinner. Unless you've got a family member there that you're trying to get rid of, then by all means bring up politics. That also works. All right.
Cool. Anything else?
I got nothing else.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks so much.
So we're going to go back to Wednesday.
Yep. Wednesdays at 6
from
p.m.
next week. Okay.
Yep.
I might not be able to make it because that's going to be Sarah's birthday next Wednesday night.
Oh, okay. And you know what? Actually, I might not be here either. So now that I think about it, we might actually skip next Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. We will post about it if we are or are not going on.
What's yours, Jess?
I'm out of town.
Where are you?
In Utah. I told you about this. All right. So thanks very much, guys, for tuning in and watching. Have a very happy Thanksgiving. If you are celebrating Thanksgiving.
From all of us here at Partners.
Have a happy holidays in general. And we will see you guys soon. Thanks so much.